This time we're going to move back into chapter 3. See if I can get full screen on this. There we go. So we'll go back to chapter 3, informal fallacies. And again, if you have any questions, or if you're having any problems with the problems in these chapters, please do email me, and I'm happy to provide you with the answers for those problems. In any event, do keep in touch and let me know any issues you might be having. You have my email address, you can reach me through Moodle, and so on. Okay? So we'll move in here and we're going to try, see if we can do this quickly enough to get through 3.4 and 3.5. I should say I'm doing this in the same day as 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. So I'm getting a little tired out from lecturing online. It's sort of like lecturing in class. And professors get tired after doing a number of lectures in a day. But that's not to complain. It's a happy thing to be able to present the contents of this chapter to you. And yeah, I feel bad because I think I'm better in person than this voice you hear on the screen. But let's go to 3.4. These are fallacies of presumption, ambiguity, and so on. And these are very important. Begging the past question, complex question, false dichotomy. These actually are terms that you will hear often. Not just in logic. You'll hear that somebody's begging the question. You'll hear that somebody's asking, or that something's a false dichotomy. Fewer times you'll hear about a complex question. But in any event, let's get into that and what equivocation is and vividly composition division. We'll have plenty of problems to work with, and hopefully we can do section 5. If we don't get to that, that'll be a separate video that I'll upload as well. Okay, so let's begin with begging the question. In everyday parlance, interestingly enough, so this will be the last of the final group of 8 fallacies. In everyday parlance, when people say this, and there's a lot of, I've noticed even on Twitter and elsewhere, that people will argue over, well, why can't we accept the more common definition of what begging the question is? So it has a very specific meaning, which we're going to use now, which many people want to still hold to. But begging the question, literally, I think it's just kind of the meaning. Well, it raises a number of questions. It begs, this raises a number of questions. And so in everyday language, that's all that it means. But it has a very specific meaning in logic, and it certainly has a very specific meaning when many people use it. But there are many times just in everyday language where people say, well, that just raises a whole set. It begs a question, right? That's not its meaning, but we'll get to there if this thing will fall. So the first 3 fallacies in this section are called fallacies of presumption. Arguments containing these fallacies presume what they purport to prove. That's the point. That's why it's called a presumption. It's presuming what it's set out to prove. Okay? This will be fairly clear when we get to fallacy 15. And again, I am not a fan of these, but I find that this is better than going through the book. I also could put the book on here. That is, I could show the book and then go through page by page and then talk up through the questions that are there. But you're already doing the questions and you already have the book, and I take it that you're smart enough to be able to read the book and follow it. So yes. Why am I so smart? Because I'm so intelligent. The first fallacy in this section and the 15th fallacy in your textbook is one called begging the question. You could see that it's presumed, why am I so smart? It's because I'm so intelligent. In other words, it begs the question, right? Why am I so smart? Because I'm so intelligent. That begging the question doesn't have to do with the question mark here. It's circular. To be intelligent is to be smart. Right? In other words, it's purporting to prove something that its premise already includes in it. To commit this fallacy, the arguer creates the illusion that premises provide adequate support by leaving out a key premise, or by restating the conclusion as a premise. That's the most often one. Or as you can see, that's what restating the conclusion as a premise is another way of saying reasoning in a circle. Your conclusion only repeats the premise. Okay? And so that's why it begs the question. It begs for some other premise to be put in there to help prove the conclusion. The cartoon that follows illustrates the first way of committing the fallacy: leave out a key premise. Tracy, you've probably read about the problem of binge drinking on campus. Yes, I have. But binge drinking is really no problem at all. Oh? After all, these binge drinkers eventually sober up. Just wait a minute. So what's being left out here? Right? Obviously, the problem it's begging the question is, it's leaving out the fact that what happens after they sober up, and also what binge drinkers tend to do while actually drunk, right? Right? So it's presuming an answer. Binge drinkers eventually sober up, therefore binge drinking is not a real problem. Right? The argument begs the question: just because they eventually sober up, does this mean that binge drinking is not a problem? Right? See how this leads you to it begs a question. It begs it's moving around the main issue. People are not against binge drinking because they eventually sober up, and that makes it not a problem. Okay? It's missing a premise. If binge drinkers eventually sober up, then binge drinking is not a real problem. See how there's a missing premise there? If you put that in, then you'd have something of an argument, right? And then you could attack the premise. Well, this isn't really the problem here. But by not stating the premise, right, that is, he leaves the question open. So because he leaves out this premise, which may be false, Mike commits the fallacy of begging the question. So version 2 is to restate the conclusion as a premise. This is the more popular version of it. Although begging the question in terms of leaving out important information is a crucial one as well, one that we just went through. How was the football game, Mike? Great, we won. That's nice. You know, I think that any great football player has innate ability. Why is that? Because anyone who doesn't have any ability couldn't be a great football player, right? So he's arguing that every great football player has an innate ability, and then he just restates this, right? This is actually a premise, is actually just a restatement of the conclusion. That there's a relationship between innate ability and being a great football player. Okay? So Mike's argument, anyone who does not have innate ability could not be a great football player, therefore any great football player has innate ability. The premise, which may be false, says the same thing as the conclusion, thus it provides no genuine support for the conclusion. In other words, whereas in general the previous one had said there was a missing premise, right? That's part of begging the question. In a weird way here, in this form of begging the question, there is no premise. You're just repeating the conclusion. The premise just gets repeated as the conclusion, so there's no real premise at all. Reasoning, which is very close to this version, which is reasoning in a circle. Mike, I just came from my ethics class. I'm convinced that Aristotle's ethics is the greatest ethical theory ever proposed. Why so? Because it has influenced more people than any other theory. And how do you know that? Wait for it. To influence most people, it must appeal to most people. No? Well, okay. And to appeal to the most people, it must contain the most profound insights, right? Well, maybe. This does seem like an argument ad populum, an argument to the people, right? That we covered earlier in the chapter, right? But wait for it. And Aristotle's theories contain the most profound insights. And how do you know that? That's obvious, because it's the greatest theory. Notice how she's just reasoning in a circle. Right? All that stuff in the middle about being very popular and so on, she never actually addresses why it's the greatest theory. Okay? In other words, she reasons in a circle. She begins with the premise that it's the greatest theory, and therefore has influenced the most people. And then Art says, and in conclusion, it's the greatest theory. Right? So that's called reasoning in a circle. So as Tracy's argument, Aristotle's ethics is the greatest theory, therefore it contains the most profound insights, therefore it appeals to the most people, therefore it influences the most people, therefore it is the greatest theory. See the circle? She comes right back to this, okay? The argument goes in a circle, thus it constitutes a case of begging the question. 16, complex question. Do you always cheat at cards? So the classic version of this is, do you still beat your wife? It's a terrible example, but it's a classic example that's known in popular culture. And it's known as it hides an extra question, and it presumes something. That's why it's called presumption. Do you always cheat at cards? Well, there's no way for this kid to answer that without saying either, no, I don't always cheat at cards, which means that he sometimes does. Or he says yes, and then he always cheats at cards. In other words, this is actually often used in police interrogations, that they'll ask complex questions to get people to admit to something that they have done, or in some cases haven't. So, have you beat your wife recently is again a horrible but prominent example of the complex question. In other words, however you answer the question, you're admitting guilt, right? In other words, it hides 2 or 3 questions that are presumed behind it, right? Do you still beat your wife? Well, if you answer yes, then you're a wife beater. And if you answer no, you're saying, no, I stopped beating my wife, but yet I'm somebody who's beating my wife, right? So that's a version of the complex question. So the fallacy consists in phrasing 2 or more questions in the form of a single question, right? So the first question would be, do you cheat at cards? Then the second question would be, do you always cheat at cards? It's also called a loaded question. That's how we talk about it in everyday English language, right? Oh, that's a loaded question, right? And in fact, in law courts and so on, that somebody, a defense attorney or a prosecutor, when dealing with witnesses, can object based upon loaded questions. Yesterday was my birthday, and you didn't even send me a card. I'm sorry, I guess I forgot. Have you always been this insensitive? See how this it asks 2 questions, right, at the same time. The only way to answer would be, Tracy asked Mike if he's always been this insensitive. If Mike says yes, then he admits he is insensitive. If he says no, he implies past sensitivity. A question that traps the person to whom it is asked into admitting something he may not want to is a complex question. And admit is a bit too strong. It just means there's no way to answer this without taking on some form of guilt. Complex question is easy to recognize because it always ends with a question mark, hence being a question. But for the fallacy to be committed, the question must consist of 2 or more questions. This isn't quite it. What you're doing is you're simplifying. Is there something presumed in the question? Well, what's presumed is that he's insensitive. In the question of do you still beat your wife, it's presumed the person is a wife beater, whether he's continuing to do it or not. Right? That presumption. So yes, I guess in one way one could say that it takes 2 questions and squashes them into one. But the first question you would ask is, are you insensitive? Second question, have you always been this way? Right? And so it takes those and forces you into a corner. False dichotomy, we see this all the time. Right? You want your transportation, take your pick. Right? So, in other words, you wouldn't want one or the other. The arguer presents 2 unlikely options as if they were the only ones available. Right? In other words, these are not the only means of transportation. We can go elsewhere, go to another car salesman. Tomorrow's the homecoming dance. Are you going to invite me? Well, either you invite me or you don't deserve to be called my friend. Okay? That's a false choice. Okay? Or false dichotomy. Okay? In everyday English language, we tend to call it a false choice or a false dichotomy. In other words, there are more options here. Right? He might not invite her because he is just her friend, not a boyfriend or something, and wouldn't take her to the dance. So he may do something else for her. So Tracy's first premise is that either Mike invites her to the dance or he doesn't deserve to be called a friend. That's the stated premise. The implied premise is you do this in order to deserve to be called the friend. Right? The conclusion which follows validly is that Mike will invite her. Tracy creates then the illusion, the unlikely options that she offers to Mike are the only available ones. That's the whole point of a false dichotomy. These are not the only options on the table, right? It's not, are you pregnant or not, right? Those are the two options. You're either pregnant or not pregnant, right? But there are more options than these. That is, Tracy creates the illusion that either or premise is true when in fact it is probably false. He does deserve to be called a friend, even if he doesn't invite her to the dance. So false dichotomy always involves an either or, so look for that, right? Look for the or if you're looking for a false dichotomy, and then you have to ask, are these the only options available? And if they are the only options available, then it's no fallacy. But if you see either or on the homework or on an exam or quiz, you need to think right away about false dichotomy, okay? Just as complex question, you'll see a question mark. Suppressed evidence. Nice and warm, great for a swim, danger, piranhas. Suppressed evidence. An argument ignores important evidence that requires a different conclusion. So we saw this in the first chapter, if you took that in this class, where we said that in order to have a cogent inductive argument, we must make sure there's no evidence that's being left out, right? The water is nice and warm, therefore it's probably good for a swim, right? But what he's leaving out is the danger of piranhas. So it's not really suppressed on the cartoon, but he's making the argument going, well, it's not going to be great for a swim if there's piranhas in the water. In economics class, we were studying life occupations. That's interesting. Over the past 75 years, typewriter repairmen have earned an excellent income. I never would have guessed that. Based on those figures, typewriter repairmen should earn lots of money for years to come. Okay? Maybe you should drop out of school and become a typewriter repairman. Maybe I should. I hate being poor. Right? Now, Mike's argument, the typewriter repairmen have earned a good living in the past, therefore typewriter repairmen will earn a good living in the future, obviously leaves something out, which is the fact that, yes, over a 75-year period, perhaps their income was a good living in the past, but that doesn't mean it will happen in the future, right? Why? Obviously, the introduction of the microcomputer in the 1980s changed everything. Right? Sales of typewriters went way down, and there's very little use for typewriter repairmen these days. So obviously computers have almost completely replaced typewriters in recent years, though Tom Hanks famously still uses a typewriter for his work. So the correct conclusion is that typewriter repairmen will not earn a good living in the future. So good sources for suppressed evidence. You look for changes that occurred with the passage of time. Advertisements typically suppress evidence, right? Every ad ignores negative features of the product as advertised. So there's people smiling and so on in the ads, but they will not put in the problems that the product has. This happens, with pharmaceuticals, where they race through all the things that are problematic about the medication at the end of the ad, too fast for anybody to possibly listen to and hear. So let's do some practice problems with those. Sorry about these pauses that come up. I'm always waiting for this. I'm actually working off a CD, and I'm always waiting for that to load up. I haven't used the CD in forever, and I was lucky to have a computer that has it. So what fallacy is committed in this argument? Either or. Now, we know that we're looking for false dichotomy. Either we develop genetically engineered foods, or the human race will starve. The choice should be obvious. Are those the only two choices? No. Clearly, the human race need not starve. We can slow population growth and do many other things other than develop genetically modified foods, as we call them, right? So it is a false dichotomy. It's certainly not begging the question. It's not suppressed evidence. We have the either or. So that's what we look for. It's a false dichotomy. These two unlikely options presents two unlikely options as if they were the only ones available. Right? By the way, there's not two unlikely options. Having genetically modified foods is one, but it's a false dichotomy that it's either we do that or we starve. Of course, the universe is only 5,000 years old. After all, it says so in the Bible. Okay? So, there's no question mark, so it's not that. Is it suppressed evidence? Let's click on that and see. No, the arguer does not ignore important evidence that requires a different conclusion. No, it's begging the question. Why? It's in the Bible where we're told that the universe is 5,000 years old. In other words, we're essentially circling around and begging the question. The arguer begs the question, how do you know that the Bible's scientific claims are true? Right? So that's what we would need to work on. In other words, it's begging the question, which is to say, there's missing premises, which is another way of saying there's missing evidence for the Bible's claims true, literally true. What fallacy is committed here? Gina, that man I saw you with in the restaurant, is very handsome. Tell me, are you still cheating on your husband? Okay, we got a question mark, right? We don't have an either or, so it's not false dichotomy. Now, begging the question, does it necessarily come with a question mark, as we've seen? But what is really being asked here? Tell me, are you still cheating on your husband? Now, it could be the case, there's a presumption here that Gina has been somebody cheating on her husband. If she answers yes, that she's still cheating on her husband. If she answers no, she was cheating on her husband, but still not doing it, right? So the hidden presumption is Gina is somebody that cheats on her husband. Now, if there was extra information added in here, Gina, I know you cheated on your husband before. I saw you with a man who was very handsome. Tell me, are you still cheating on your husband? Then it's not a complex question, right? It wouldn't be, because you have the hidden premise articulated. But since it's hidden and assumed, it is a complex question, right? Have you cheated in the past, and if so, do you continue to cheat? Reno is either in California or Nevada, but Reno is not in California. Therefore, Reno is in Nevada. Okay? Now, here, the either is inclusive. It's either in California or it's in Nevada. It's not in California, therefore Reno is in Nevada. This is a deductive argument. Is it a false dichotomy? Well, you could say that Reno is either in California or in Nevada or somewhere else. But these are two inclusive options. This is called the inclusive either or. That is, these are the only two options given to us. And so I would say no fallacy. Right? So since Reno is in Nevada, the first premise is clearly true, so the argument cannot be a false dichotomy. Okay? So this is a true statement. It's either in California or Nevada, and so on. This ad says that for a $1,000 investment, we can set up a business in our home and earn $100,000 per year by working only 5 hours per week. We'll be rich. Okay, so when have we seen the words advertisement both in the book and here? Well, we saw it when it came to suppressed evidence. Okay, in other words, we can set up a business in our home and earn $100,000 per year by working only 5 hours per week. Well, the suppressed evidence would be all the times that people have set up a business in their home using whatever company this is, and have not gotten rich, right? So it is suppressed evidence. It's not no fallacy. This is clearly fallacious reasoning, right? And it's not a false dichotomy, right? So let's see what no fallacy says. Would you respond to an ad like this? I hope not. Like, we recognize they're suppressing evidence. They're not admitting to all that has occurred. But again, when you see an advertisement, look for suppressed evidence. Thousands of people respond to ads like this every year and probably never earn much money at all. Get-rich schemes, of course, usually have the problem of suppressed evidence. Fallacies of ambiguity arise from the use of ambiguous language in the premises or the conclusion. And ambiguous, just to let you know, just means it has words often have multiple meanings, and an argument trades. Okay, that's what ambiguous means. So equivocation. Number 19. You're the doughboy. How about lending me some dough? See how you move from the notion of the Pillsbury Doughboy to lending out actual money. So in other words, another use of the word dough is not just the dough from the Pillsbury Doughboy. Equivocation. The conclusion of an argument depends on a word or phrase being used in two different senses. Okay, so watch for that. Okay. I'm playing the role of Yum Yum in the Mikado. Isn't it exciting? Yes, it is. I'm going to be famous. You are? Yes, I already have several fans. You do? That's great. Yes, I just bought this one today. That's actually more of an idiotic joke, but it is equivocation, right? I have several fans, devices for cooling, therefore because I have several fans, I will be famous. Right? There's some equivocation. Equivocation is often used in humor, although I can't think of an example off the top of my head. You'll notice that people do, she obviously in real life would have meant that as a joke. It was not really an argument there. And ambivalent, okay? I can hardly wait to go inside. An ambivalent happens when an arguer misinterprets an ambiguous statement and then draws a conclusion based on the faulty impression. Right? Okay? Bikinis half off. Oh, God. Some more of this. Okay. He's misreading this to think that women inside have bikinis half off. These slides really embarrass me sometimes. But I do find it better than just repeating the book. Okay, so I can hardly wait to go inside. So this, this pig is assuming that the bikinis are literally half off the people inside. So you misinterpret an ambiguous statement, this is not ambiguous to anybody who's not an idiot, and then draw the conclusion based upon that faulty impression. So usually the ambiguous statement is made by someone other than the arguer, and the ambiguity arises from a mistake in grammar or even punctuation. That's right? And so it's going to be, for equivocation, you're going to have to trade on two uses of the term, but in ambivalently, the ambiguous statement is made by somebody else, okay? And it arises from a mistake in grammar or punctuation. I saw a raccoon looking out of my dorm room window. Raccoons can be destructive. Did he tear up your room? So Tracy's statement is ambiguous. Who was looking through the window, Tracy or the raccoon? Mike's argument, Tracy said she saw a raccoon looking out of her window. Therefore, the raccoon was inside Tracy's room. Do you see how She says something else, and then his argument trades on a misinterpretation because she's statement, right? And you'll see that happens a lot in, that's why you have to be careful with grammar. And a lot of statements can be taken in two different ways. Equivocation arises, and this is important, from ambiguity in a word or phrase used by the arguer, whereas amphibole arises from an ambiguity in a statement usually made by somebody other than the arguer. So look for it to be a sign, look for it to be somebody else, okay? Equivocation is one person, amphibole is going to be more than one person, or a person and a sign in a store, or something like that. That's how you're going to be able to tell the difference. The next two fallacies are called fallacies of grammatical analogy because they occur in arguments that are grammatically similar to other non-fallacious arguments. You'll see what I mean. Composition. I can handle these shielded cans of uranium a lot easier if I empty them into this. Okay? The arguer erroneously transfers an attribute from the parts of something onto the whole. Okay? They are safe there, but if you take them out of the shielding, then obviously that would create a problem. So he moves from a part to the whole. It's not the best example, but hopefully we'll see others. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Of course I do. That should never happen. Not one of those chemicals I was mixing was explosive. But again, you're transferring from the part to the whole. We do know that there are many chemicals that on their own are perfectly fine, but then once you combine them with each other, they become explosive, right? So in other words, this scientist here is transferring the fact that each of the chemicals on their own is non-explosive to the whole, that is, when they're all put together. What were you mixing? Just a little glycerin and a couple of kinds of acid. Right? These are non-explosive on their own, but once you put them in, you get a bomb. And she rightly calls him an idiot. So the two parts are non-explosive, therefore the whole is non-explosive. Right? So that's a fallacious argument. Just because the parts are non-explosive does not mean that the whole is non-explosive. In this case, the whole consisted of nitroglycerin, which is highly explosive. Okay. Mike's argument is fallacious because he has improperly transferred the attribute of being non-explosive from the parts onto the whole. I keep repeating this. Okay, so that's the fallacy of composition. Now it's division. Now we go the other way. There's a certain attribute of the whole that you transfer down to the parts. Mom loved that vase. Maybe she'll love the pieces. Well, of course, that doesn't follow, right? She's not going to like the pieces because what she liked was the vase as a whole, right? It doesn't mean that love transfers to each of the little pieces. So the arguer erroneously transfers an attribute from the whole of something onto its parts. Okay. Idiot. Mike, I'm preparing your favorite dessert pumpkin pie with whipped cream. Wow, I can hardly wait. If you like the pie, then you should like the ingredients, right? First the crust, a nice thick slice of lard, and a cup of flour. Couple of eggs, finally covered the whole mess with whipped cream. There it is, dig in, and then of course he has to say, it looks wonderful. Obviously this makes the fact is you transfer from the whole to its parts, but you never put the whole together. This isn't a real pie. It's just the pile or the parts all together. So just because you love pumpkin pie doesn't mean you like each individual part separately. So Mike likes the whole, the pumpkin pie, therefore Mike likes the parts. Flour, lard, I don't know if anybody uses that anymore, eggs, etc. Just because the whole is something that Mike likes does not mean that the parts are something that he likes. Right? Nobody eats raw flour. She's transferred the attribute of being liked by Mike from the whole onto the parts. That's division. Okay, composition from the parts to the whole, division from the whole to the parts. Okay, and again, this gives you that. Composition, parts to the whole, division, whole to the parts. Also remember, the transfer of the attribute must be improper, right? So for example, right, a piece of chocolate cake, right? If I say I like chocolate cake, and you give me a piece of a chocolate cake, you can move that attribute, right? A piece of chocolate cake is delicious, right? And so that would be a proper transference, okay? But improperly would be just giving me, I don't know, just merely the dark Cooker's chocolate or something like that. So now let's do some questions. What fallacies committed here? Julia said she dandled her baby drinking a martini. That's terrible. Babies are not supposed to drink alcohol. Well, obviously what we're getting here is going to be either an equivocation or an amphibole. Right? This is not about moving from whole to its parts. Right? Obviously there is an ambiguity here. Right? She said she dandled her baby drinking a martini. This could mean two things. Either Julia held her baby, we'll just say held her baby, drinking a martini. This could mean that Julia was drinking martini while holding her baby. That's also not very great. Or she held her baby while the baby was drinking martini. And so that would be, right, an amphibole. Right? The arguer probably misinterprets Julia's statement and then draws an incorrect conclusion. Remember, this involves somebody else. So that's how you tell from equivocation from amphibole. This is somebody else making the misreading. Every member of the orchestra plays beautifully, therefore the orchestra plays beautifully. Now this is a problem of division. Composition. You're moving from the parts to the whole. Okay? Now, is it the case that if every member of the orchestra plays beautifully, the orchestra itself plays beautifully? Now, I'm a little unsure what the answer might be. But in general, we don't think that just because every member of the orchestra plays beautifully, perhaps together there is not the right balance. And therefore, I would say it is a fallacy of composition. Why? Because when an orchestra is together, you need more than every member playing beautifully. They have to be in time, you have to have a good conductor, and so on. So I would say it's a fallacy of composition. The arguer transfers the attribute of playing beautifully from members onto the orchestra. If the members do not play together, then the orchestra will sound terrible. Here's another one. A block of granite is dense. Whatever is dense is stupid. Therefore, a block of granite is stupid. Now, obviously, there's two meanings of the word dense. Do we have another person here? No. Is somebody saying, I heard this? No. So we have one person. So it's either it's either amphibole or equivocation. So, just because something is dense, there's two meanings, and so therefore, one meaning of the word dense obviously has to do with density, and the other meaning of dense means to be stupid, right? And so that is equivocation, right? The word dense is used in two different senses. Jenny is 83 years old, therefore every cell in her body is 83 years old. Now we're moving from the whole to the parts. So it's either no fallacy or it's division. Now, we know, in fact, that every cell in one's bodies, I think the science is still saying something like every 7 years, every cell in your body has been renewed or changed to something new, right? So, in fact, we know that not every cell in her body is 83 years old. So it's not a no fallacy, but it is a division. We move from the whole to the parts and transfer, right? Most cells in the human body are replaced every 7 years or so. Every tile in this tile floor is tan colored, therefore the floor is tan colored. Let's see. Now, if every tile in this tiled floor is tan colored, would it be the case that the floor would be tan colored? Or is this a problem of composition, falsely moving from the parts to the whole? Well, I would say that if every tile in the tiled floor is tan, you have a tan floor. So there's no fallacy here, right? The floor would have to be colored tan, right? So now let's look at all 8 of our fallacies. Either you buy me that 16-room mansion or I'll be forced to live on the street. You don't want me to live on the street, do you? Okay, clearly we got the either or. So we have the possibility of false dichotomy. Well, we don't see, if you're a good test taker, any no fallacy, but there are other options here. We could buy this person a relatively modest house. They don't have to live on the street, right? So it's a false choice, false dichotomy, right? Bob said that he and Fred were married, but that's impossible. The state does not recognize same-sex marriages, okay? What's going on here, okay? Bob said that he and Fred were married. Well, now in the U.S., by the way, same-sex marriages are in every state, but let's leave that aside. Bob said that he and Fred were married. What we're getting here is somebody else making a conclusion based upon an ambiguity in language. And that leads us to amphiboly, right? Because Bob said that he and Fred were married could mean one of two things. A, that he and Fred are married, or what else? That Bob is married to perhaps somebody named Jane and Fred is married to someone named Sonia, right? In other words, they may both be married, but not to each other. It's an ambiguous phrase. And therefore, because somebody else is making a conclusion based upon it, it's an amphiboly. The arguer probably misinterprets the statement made by Bob. Paul, I saw you trying on a new shirt the other day. Level with me. Do you still shoplift your clothing? Right? I saw you trying a new shirt the other day. Level with me. Do you still shoplift your clothing? There's no evidence here. There's no question given here. We have about whether Paul, in fact, has ever done shoplifting. So do you still shoplift your clothing? Presumes, right? If he answers yes, he's still shoplifting. If he answers no, he was once upon a time shoplifting. So in other words, it presumes that he is a shoplifter, at least in the past. So is a complex question, right? The question is really two questions. Have you shoplifted in the past? And if you do you continue to shoplift? Also, the giveaway there, was the question mark at the end. This cheesecake has 200 calories per ounce, therefore each serving of this cheesecake has 200 calories per ounce. Okay? Yeah, so this could be a fallacy of division, moving from the whole down to its parts. I tend to think that we should see some homogeneity across the cheesecake. It's good to presume that if the cheesecake as a whole, right, it's not unless it's a special kind of cheesecake, I would say there's no fallacy here, right? That the cheesecake as a whole, properly, when you split it up, should have 200 calories per ounce as well. So I think no fallacy. If the whole is 200 calories per ounce, then the parts would also be 200 calories per ounce. Now, if it was some sort of special cheesecake where it's made up of different things with different parts, then this wouldn't work. But in general, cheesecakes are all homogeneous, which is to say they're mixed, they're put into a pan and then made, and are the same throughout. That's what homogeneous means. Okay. Hopefully that one was straightforward. Again, one could imagine a different type of cake, right, where that wouldn't work, right? Each page in this, so for example, there's ice cream cakes which have different types of ice cream, and therefore different types of calories, and therefore that wouldn't work. Each page in this large phone book could easily be torn in half. Therefore, the phone book can easily be torn in half. Well, no. A phone book is, if you've ever seen one, is actually quite hard to tear in half. So this is moving from part to whole. And when we move from part to whole, move to composition. Right? The argue transfer is the attribute of being easily torn in half from each individual page, and in a phone book, the pages are easy to tear to the whole book itself, which would be very hard to tear. The New York Times is the best newspaper. This is so because it has the best writers. We know this is true because the best writers would never write for any newspaper but the best, and the best newspaper is the New York Times. Notice the circular, right? We end where we started. That is begging the question. Okay, there it goes in a circle. Okay, so when you see it start with a premise that leads back to a conclusion that restates the premise, you have begging the question. Dorothy, I know you can help me with this. What's the capital of Vermont? Okay, is this a complex question? No, I think there is a presumption that she can help with this. There's no division here moving from part to whole, so I'd say no fallacy. It's not really two or more questions. As far as we know, at no time in the past has anyone been cured of Lou Gehrig's disease. Therefore, at no time in the future will anyone be cured of Lou Gehrig's disease. Okay? So, this is not about moving from parts to the whole. There's not an either or. So it must be suppressed evidence. And what's the suppressed evidence? Well, I don't know a lot about the history of Lou Gehrig's disease, but we've made great advances, perhaps, in looking at we made great advances with many diseases, and therefore what we're doing is suppressing evidence, namely that since we've discovered Lou Gehrig's disease some 70 years ago, 80 years ago, a lot of advances have been made in medicine. So suppressed evidence. We ignore the important evidence that there have been great strides in medical science in the past 50 years. The informal fallacies. What fallacy is committed here? A violinist is a person, therefore a terrible violinist is a terrible person. Okay? I wouldn't say there's no fallacy. To be a terrible violinist, there are lots of wonderful people who are terrible violinists. So what obviously somebody's doing is trading on to be a terrible violinist is to be a not good musician is not the same as being a terrible person. So it's not no fallacy. It's not division. We're not going from whole to the parts. We're doing equivocation. Okay? That is, the word terrible is being used in two parts. Okay? Two different ways. Right? And it's one person making that argument. So that's why it's not an ambivalent. Vanity Fair was written by either William Thackeray or Emily Bronte, but it was not written by Emily Bronte. Therefore, Vanity Fair was written by William Thackeray. Now, this could be a false dichotomy, right? But if you have a true either or, just as an example of Reno being in California or Nevada, then you can have a false dichotomy. There's that are of division, right? Just because an essay is disorganized does not mean that every sentence is disorganized. Okay? So you don't transfer this disorganization onto every part. It's not possible there. Whoever is honest is courageous, because if a person is not courageous, he can't possibly be honest. Which fallacy is this? Whoever is honest is courageous, because if a person is not courageous, he can't possibly be honest. Right? It would seem to be begging the question. We don't have suppressed evidence. We don't seem to have any equivocation because there's no trading on the different meanings of terms. It just begs the question. There's no premise given, there's no evidence given for the link between honesty and courageousness. Okay? And also, it's repeating itself. Whoever's honest is courageous, and somebody can't be courageous and can't be honest. Right? Those mean the same thing. In conclusion, Miller restates the premise in slightly different language, and the premise may be false. Okay. So let's go look back at the contents of chapter 3 and go to fallacies in ordinary language. Okay. So this section extends the early treatment of fallacies to treat real-life situations, and it suggests 3 causes that lead to commission of fallacies. Fallacies in real-life situations rarely occur in isolated, easily identifiable formats. They often involve a blurring of one fallacy with another, and several fallacies can occur together in a single argument. So what's good about this chapter, or this part of this subchapter, is, and now we move into 3.5, is that you will see in ordinary language how different fallacies tend to build on one another. For example, you argue that I shouldn't use my cell phone while I'm driving because it may lead to an accident. Well, just because you can't use one doesn't mean that others can't. Obviously, you're a complete klutz. Let me ask you, were you born a klutz, or are you a klutz by choice? Right? So we get one fallacy there. We get a red herring, I think, there, right? And yeah, I think, and then a changing of the subject there. So, were you born a klutz? Well, that's a complex question, and so on. So you can see several fallacies at the same time. It begins with an ad hominem abusive, right? And ends with a complex question. This is the ad hominem. It doesn't begin with one. Obviously, you're a complete klutz. That's a ad hominem, and then it ends with a complex question. So why may the arguer have been led to make these fallacies? Well, one could be do that for the reason of intent. They intentionally are trying to get out of having to face the fact that they're using a cell phone while driving, and it may lead into an accident. It could be that they're careless mentally. That is, they have an emotional disposition favoring or opposing. They want to drive with their cell phone, and so they're just being careless mentally, trying to throw anything up against the wall to hope something sticks. And perhaps they just have unexamined presuppositions in their own worldview. Perhaps they think that people who are klutzes can't talk to them about cell phone usage or something like that. Either way, these are reasons that people often create fallacies. The fallacies start to come very quickly when somebody's just trying to make something stick, especially if they have a conclusion that is quite shaky, right? I mean, driving a cell phone has shown to be as bad as drinking under the influence, right? And so this person then starts trying to say anything that might work to diffuse the other person or to get them away from the argument. I still think there's a red herring. Just because you can't use one doesn't mean that others can't. Like, in other words, it's changing the subject. But yes, this is an ad hominem, and so on. So it's a mixture of a red herring and an ad hominem. The element of emotion is clear. Or the person merely has a negative attitude simply because I don't like you now because you don't agree with me. This negative attitude, together with a certain degree of mental carelessness, leads the arguer to commit the fallacies. Okay? So some people don't argue in good faith, right? Emotions and your passions or your commitment to something often leads into fallacies. And there's an important conclusion we can sort of reach here, right? Which is that there are things that we are often committed to and that we're very emotional about. There are many political issues that people are very emotional about, whether it's healthcare, abortion, the death penalty, how long prison sentences should be, the type of prisons we should have. These are not just things that we argue about logically, but are also very passionate. And when our passions get in the way, that's when fallacies start to become fast and furious. Mr. Tax Collector, if you raise my taxes, you'll be taking food from the mouths of 4 hungry children, and one of them needs life-saving medicine. Okay, what fallacy do we have here? Obviously an appeal to pity, right? I'm sure you'll agree that my tax bill is high enough now, because if you don't agree, your house and car may become the target of vandals. Now we get the threat of force, right? So appeal to pity and the threat of force. By the way, I should say that as you see these for the first time, I'm often seeing these for the first time. I probably haven't said that before, but I find it's quicker if I just go through the slides that I'm given and talk them through. That makes it easier and makes me sound a little bit more natural than if I went through the whole CD and so on first and then came back. I found that I sound more wooden, although you may think I sound wooden enough already. So that, in any case, you get these two, and these are the first two fallacies that we got in 3.2. Now, these fallacies may have been motivated in part by emotional factors, but the primary factor is probably intent, right? The arguer does not want her tax bill raised, and she uses pity and threats to get her way. Okay, right? And so here's the intent, right? So it's not emotional, although people are pretty emotional about paying their taxes, but here it's intent. I need to get out of this. Okay? Everyone in your neighborhood is flying the American flag except you. Okay, so when we get an everyone is doing it, so should you. Which fallacy is usually, is that one usually? Well, obviously that is the ad populum, or to the people fallacy. What's the matter with you? The way I see it, either you fly the flag or you don't deserve to be called a loyal American. Now here we get complex question, right? You may have reasons for not flying the flag, other than not being a loyal American. In fact, when you go down most neighborhoods in just about any city or town, most people don't fly the American flag. I would just say a majority, perhaps. The argument commits the fallacies of appeal to the people. You just have to remember that. I always remember ad populum. Appeal to the people. Complex question. All right, what's the matter with you? That presumes that something is the matter with you. And a false dichotomy, right? So you get three fallacies, three sentences, three fallacies. As with the previous example, these fallacies may have been motivated in part by emotion, but the arguer's worldview is probably the most salient factor. The arguer supposes that public displays of patriotism are essential to proving loyalty to one's country. And of course, this could be one of the least and most easy ways to show patriotism. But they're serving in the military, there's doing volunteer work, there's doing work in your communities, there's serving in public office. There are many ways to show your patriotism. And probably the easiest thing to do is to fly the flag. Each of us has a worldview, and it consists of a network of beliefs, habits, memories, and values, and other elements that make the world in which we live meaningful. Right? And when things go against that worldview, we tend to make fallacious arguments because we want to hold on to our worldview. Okay? For example, our cultural language, age, religion, political outlook, and economic status play a major role in defining how we see the world. Right? And when that's challenged, it's like challenging our own identity, right? And who we think we are. The practice problems that follow ask that you try to determine the causal factors that led the arguer to commit the fallacies in question. Such an attempt is admittedly speculative. And what all this means here is you're giving it a try. You're looking at the effect. So this is going to be causal inference, by the way. You're looking at the effect, which is a bad set of arguments, and you're trying to think, why would that person make that argument? Okay? So again, it's speculative. You don't know the person involved. But let's try. The purpose of these practice problems is to direct your attention to the fact that the fallacies arise from various mental states. If you're familiar with what those mental states are, you may be less likely to commit fallacies yourself and more able to resolve disagreements between yourself and other arguers. And I think this is an important part of this book here, that in many ways, I think we should take from chapter 1, a presumption that other people are trying to make good arguments, that they are not arguing in bad faith. But often when we see fallacious reasoning, in order to get away from it ourselves is an important is important for things in life. And that's because of arguments you make to yourself. Perhaps you see changing evidence, right? And therefore your premises have changed and therefore lead you to a different conclusion, right? People have converted from Christianity to Judaism. They've made arguments to themselves for that. People have converted vastly on their positions on abortion, on the death penalty, on a myriad of issues where others don't change their mind, right? So if you see within yourself that your argument is based upon an ad hominem and not really paying attention to somebody else's argument, or any of the other fallacies we've seen, that's a good way to begin, in some sense, to be able to listen to others and to pay attention to their arguments, right? And to see what evidence they give for their conclusions. So, the terrorists who attacked the World Trade Center really shouldn't be blamed for their actions. They came from poor, struggling families oppressed by religion. You argue that terrorists should be punished, but you've always been a mean-spirited, stingy guy with no sympathy for anyone. We obviously have an ad hominem here. So, let's go there. But do we have an appeal to pity? Yes, they came from poor, struggling families, so we have an appeal to pity, and we have the ad hominem abusive, right? So going down there, we click, right? Tries to support this arguer tries to support its conclusion by evoking pity from the reader or listener, and tries to discredit his opponent's arguments by calling him names. We don't have anything like an appeal to authority above, no you two or hypocrisy argument, no missing the point, no straw man. Okay. Now, what factors may have led the arguer to commit these fallacies? Right? Is there an intent here? I think it could be an unexamined worldview. This person has of terrorism and terrorists that differs from others. Supposition that one should be sympathetic towards everybody, even if they are terrorists. It's not argument. Do we want to select another answer? Well, let's see. It sincerely is usually grounded in emotion, and that's correct, right? You want the other person to feel pity as well, right? But there could also be their intent, right? They want you to they're intending to get you on their side, and so they're throwing up anything against the wall, something for himself or for someone else by arguing this way. I'm not sure. I think intent can often be, I want you to. That doesn't matter. Do not worry, this will not come up on the exam. But it's good to have these in mind in order to then let's click one that's good, click one that's good. We should be done. Click OK. No, we don't want to select any other answers. But again, about is good for us just in trying to think about when we commit our own fallacies. Why are we doing that? Is it intent? Am I trying to get something for myself? I think often just winning the argument is good enough for intent, right? People throw anything against the wall to get you to believe what they believe. But that also has to do with one's worldview. It also has to do with emotions attached to that worldview. I don't like the easy separation this chapter makes among those. Maggie, I see that you're dating a guy with blue hair. I read in the paper that some guys with blue hair was convicted of date rape. That guy's now in jail. You better be careful. So we have analogy, right? Between one person with blue hair and another person with blue hair. You better be careful. After all, there's no proof having blue hair doesn't lead to rape. There's no proof that. What do we know that is? We know that's an appeal to ignorance. But why take the chance? I have blonde hair and I'm a nice guy. Why don't you date me? Now, obviously we have some intent here. He's trying to get something for himself. But we have what? I guess this is a hasty generalization of what they're going with, right? We have hasty generalization. All people with blue hair move from one to everybody with blue hair. And then then we have the appeal to ignorance. There's no proof that having blue hair doesn't lead to rape. And there's no way to prove a negative, as we say. So it's hasty does not involve a generalization of any kind. Okay. Oh, it's weak analogy. Oh, sorry. I thought I was actually, I didn't read weak analogy down here. I need to read them all before I start to give an answer. So we start with weak analogy. I was right in the first place. Then we get the appeal to ignorance, right? And then we get complex question, right? I have blonde hair and I'm a nice guy. I think, yeah. Why don't you date me, right? So there we go. Okay, click OK. Boom. The conclusion depends on the claim that the two men behave in a similar way because both have blue hair. That's the analogy. Also, the arguer claims that something is true because nobody has proved it. That's the appeal to ignorance. And taken in context, the first question is really two questions. Why take the chance? Right? Okay, good. Do you see why take the chance is two questions in one? Well, there's obviously other. I'm not sure why that is. Why would this? Is this the first question? This is what you get, like as I said before. After all, there's no proof. That's appeal to ignorance, and then the complex question. Yeah, I don't see it. Why take the chance? I think that's a single question. Why take the chance on that weak analogy? Why take the chance and you date a rapist? Why don't you date me is not a complex question. A complex question would be something like, why are you still dating people with blue hair, right? Or something like that. But in any case, there we go. What factors may have led? More than one answer. Obviously, intent is he wants to get to date Maggie, and I think that's enough, right? He's obviously trying to get her away from the blonde hair. You say it's wrong for me to download music from the net without paying for it. That's crazy. Everybody's doing it. Okay, we know if everybody's doing it, then we're going to get an appeal to the people. So we're already down here. We already know the answer. That's crazy. Everybody's doing it. You know what's really wrong? It's all these bank robberies and burglaries. People are even killed in these crimes. And the poor children who will never see their parents again because of these criminals. This is a red herring. Okay? In other words, we've changed from downloading music to bank robberies and burglaries, which is not relevant to downloading music. Okay? So it's an appeal to the people. Everybody does it. And then a red herring. Okay? He claims that the internet is proper because other people are doing it, and he then changes the subject to bank robberies and burglaries. Okay? So what factors may have led to him doing this? Well, could be an unexamined worldview, right? It could be intent. He wants to continue to download music without feeling fault. And it could just be emotion and carelessness, right? Like in other words, he or she feels emotionally that they should be able to download this music, and it's nothing compared to other kinds of crime, right? So you got intent, right? The arguer wants to dispense with his opponent's argument so he can continue stealing music from the web. Let's see and that's good enough for them. I'm glad they're keeping these gay scouts out of the Boy Scouts. They let the gays in. Then next it will be transvestites, then drag queens, porn pushers, child abusers, and every variety of criminal. Also, the famous televangelist Benny Hinn agrees with me. What more proof could you want? What fallacies are committed here? Well, obviously, we have slippery slope. Okay? So we've already gotten down here, right? We do one thing, then we get porn pushers, child abusers, and every variety of criminal. Of course, there's no relationship between being gay and any of these. Although many drag queens are in fact gay, but not all gay people are drag queens. Not all gay people, I'm not sure how many are porn pushers. Certainly there's no relationship between being gay and being a child abuser and every variety of criminal. It's a slippery slope. And then this person makes the argument that the famous televangelist Benny Hinn agrees with me. That's an unqualified authority. Okay, so what factors could have led this? I think it's an unexamined worldview. This person is a homophobe, and they haven't examined it carefully, and thus want to make this kind of argument. Right? As it says here, the worldview probably includes the unexamined presupposition that gay people are per se immoral and undesirable. No, for now. I think giving one answer is enough. You argue that public school teachers should get more pay. Apparently you wanted to get $100,000 a year, or even $200,000. That's what you want. But of course you argue this way. You're a public school teacher yourself. So we get two different arguments. Now when we take an argument and we make it extreme, right, we have what's called a straw man. Remember that? But we also have something else. That's what you want. But of course you argue for this, you're a public school teacher yourself. Right? Now just because a public school teacher argues for raises does not mean that they're wrong. Right? You have to look at their argument. Right? And so that is the ad hominem circumstantial. Recall that. Okay? So we don't have a slippery slope, and we don't have a red herring. We have a straw man and ad hominem circumstantial. Now, what factors may have led the arguer to commit these fallacies? More than one answer is possible. Well, I think intent. Well, no, I think this person wouldn't get much of anything, except perhaps they wouldn't pay as much in taxes. Maybe emotion plus mental carelessness? Probably. The arguer appears to detest the thought of public school teachers being paid higher salaries. Right? So it's just emotion, and they just go to extremes. With all this body piercing nowadays, it's no wonder teen pregnancy is a problem. Note how irrelevant these are to each other. Yesterday I saw one of these mutilated creeps snatch an old lady's purse. That was disgusting. I think it's clear that these metal mongers are a bunch of juvenile delinquents. So, we don't have an appeal to pity. So, we don't need to start there. There's no talking here about any particular problem. Is there a weak analogy? Right? I don't think so. Perhaps one could say, that I think that there's an analogy made by those who have body piercings, right? And that, but I think it's false cause. Body piercing causes teen pregnancy. That's certainly a false cause. And certainly having body piercing doesn't lead one into a life of crime, right? And then you have what's a hasty generalization. I think it's clear that these metal mongers are a bunch of juvenile delinquents. Okay? What factors lead into this? Well, I think it's an unexamined worldview, right? That is, this person doesn't like the generations after him or her and wants to make an argument because people are being different. The arguer may be an older person who does not hold the view shared by some younger people that body piercing produces attractive results. Okay? Don't want to select another answer. Honey, either you buy me that 5-carat emerald ring, or I'll have nothing to wear on this awfully bare finger. You do want to make me happy, don't you? Give me that ring, and I will love you for life. Okay, so, first of all, we have false dichotomy. So we can stop right here. But then we do have, you want to make me happy, don't you? Well, that is two questions in one, right? It presumes that the person does want to make her happy, and this is the way to do it. And then there's something like an inverse appeal to force. If you give me that ring, I will love you for life. Okay? In other words, if you don't give me that ring, I won't love you for life. And if I explain this, what factors? Obviously intent, right? She wants the 5 camel. She wants something out of it. Right? The arguer hopes to get the ring. Nope. What fallacies are committed above? You argue that my new SUV is a polluting gas hog. That's nonsense. Look at how popular they are. Okay, boom. We have the appeal to the people. But who are you to criticize? Me? Yesterday I saw you burning leaves and the smoke was going everywhere. Right? You do it too. You're being a hypocrite, polluting, and then calling me out for having an SUV. So you have appeal to the people and the to quote or you too fallacy. Right? The arguer supports it, one is buying them. And he then tries to discredit the opposing argument by showing that the arguer fails to practice what he preaches. What factors may have led the arguer to commit these fallacies? More than one answer is possible. I think emotion and mental carelessness, right? Emotion is at least a minor factor leading to these fallacies. Okay. Let's try this. I think in unexamined worldview, arguer is probably not a strong environmentalist. Right? They don't care about pollution. Right? Do we want to select another answer? I think 2 is enough. Again, I'm just trying to go through a couple so that you see why we would answer that way. Either, and so we already know we might be getting a false dichotomy, we require school kids to recite the Pledge of Allegiance every day, or they'll grow up unpatriotic. Obviously, there are other options on the table there. Of course, they'll grow up unpatriotic if they don't recite the pledge. All patriotic people recite the pledge. So, we have a false dichotomy, but we also have, right, this leads you to believe that if all patriotic people recite the pledge, this then just simply repeats that. That's begging the question. All patriotic people recite the pledge. So we have false dichotomy and begging the question. Right? Reciting the pledge is not the only way to engender patriotism in young people, and the last statement is equivalent to the statement that people who do not recite the pledge are unpatriotic. Okay? So what factors may have led the arguer to commit these fallacies? Well, there's nothing really to be gained. It might be an unexamined worldview about, as we saw before with the flag, right? The arguer apparently believes that public displays are essential to patriotism, like the flag before, right? Do you want to select another answer? I think no for now. I think that's a good one. Unexamined worldview about what constitutes patriotism. Bob, I didn't sleep a wink last night because of your awful snoring. Don't you think you should get surgery to stop it? If you don't agree with me, then the next time it happens, I'll pour a bucket of ice water on you. How much longer do you think you can abuse me? Okay, so we clearly have an appeal to force, and we clearly have how much longer do you think you can abuse me, which is a complex question, right? Do you think you should get surgery to stop it? I don't think that's I think that's a relevant question if somebody is snoring. But there's an appeal to force, and then there's the complex question, right? The arguer threatens Bob to support the conclusion, and the second question is a complex question. However, notice the first question is not complex. Right? It's a perfectly normal thing to ask somebody who has snoring problems that they may need surgery or perhaps some sort of device to help them with their snoring. So what may have led the arguer to commit these fallacies? One more than one answer is possible. There is intent. This person does have something to gain, which is getting some sleep. The arguer wants Bob to say he'll get surgery to stop the snoring. Okay? We don't need to pick another answer. I think that is enough of one. Cases of Alzheimer's disease are on the rise these days. The trouble is that people just don't take enough vitamin E. Everybody should take a vitamin E tablet every day. I know you argue this isn't so, but you've always been hopelessly ignorant about health matters. Okay, so we have a couple of ones. This is clearly hopelessly ignorant about health matters. That's an ad hominem abusive, but also we have something here called false cause, right? That is, there's no evidence given for why, for any link between vitamin E and Alzheimer's. So it's false cause and ad hominem abusive, right? The arguer assumes that vitamin E prevents Alzheimer's disease when there's no evidence to support this claim, and the arguer attempts to discredit his opponent's argument by calling him or her ignorant. Now, what factors may have led to this? I think it's emotion and mental carelessness, but it also could be an unexamined worldview. This could be somebody who's into alternative medications and so on. So I'll start there, right? The arguer's worldview may involve unexamined presuppositions, right? That's always a possibility. Let's select another answer. But it also could just be emotion and mental carelessness, right? The arguer at least appears to have negative feelings towards the opposing arguer, right? No. Tracy Stevens, intent would be hard there unless the person is a seller of vitamin E. Tracy Stevens, who's running for president of the investment club, will probably be filing for bankruptcy. She works for Alpha General, and that company went bankrupt last month. Want more evidence? Her insurance company just canceled her car policy. You should vote for my friend Kerry Smith for club president. Kerry is financially solid. What fallacies are committed here? Okay. What we do seem to have here, who's running for president, will probably be filing for bankruptcy. So we have a move from Alpha General as a whole to the one person. Okay, so want more evidence is telling you this already is evidence. So we work from the whole to a part. That's called division, right? Okay. Her insurance policy would cancel her car policy. And then you have Kerry is financially solid. Okay. Let's see. Well, let's see if we go with this one and what it tells us. Okay. If we go with division, it's actually also composition, right? That is, if we're probably following. But this one went last month, so we seem to be going from the whole to the part. So let's see division. Yes. The arguer claims that Tracy will go bankrupt because the company she works for did. Also, the fact that Tracy's insurance company cancels her car policy has no bearing on whether she will file for bankruptcy. So, in other words, it's missing the point, right? There is no evidence given for any relationship between her insurance company canceling her policy and her going bankrupt, right? Filing for bankruptcy. There are many reasons why one would have a car policy canceled. Obviously, there's intent, right? The arguer wants the listener to vote for Kerry Smith. And now we have finished Chapter 3. So again, if you ever need to go through more questions or need answers from the question for the book, do let me know. But hopefully, you won't have any problems doing the questions in the book itself. And if you do, email me the question and ask why, or tell me why you're having problems with that. But in any case, thank you very much for joining me again. We just completed Chapter 3, and pretty soon from here, we move on to more technical stuff of doing truth tables and Venn diagrams in order to look at deductive arguments.